I think we ought to continue now.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Welcome those who are back. There are 18 people in the house, so I guess we need to continue before others join us. So I'd like to welcome Professor Akinyoade for Module 2, which is titled Understanding Conflict.
Thank you very much,
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I know we really enjoyed Ambassador Shegun Ogunyowo for that very, very inspiring session. Now we move to the second module, which is understanding conflict. You see, as a conflict manager, it is important you understand conflict very, very well. From my experience, I've seen that when a conflict manager understands conflicts, the concepts, the phenomenon very well, it rubs on the way we manage conflict. It affects our attitude to conflict, and our attitude will affect our response to conflict. That's why we dedicated a module to conflict, and it's one of the largest module. So we're going to be covering the essential nature of conflict, why we have conflicts, the types of conflict we have, and then the stages of conflict. I must say that this is one of the, in fact, to be honest, this is about the most comprehensive presentation I've had to make on conflict, especially in the aspect of the types of conflict. In previous presentations I've made everywhere, including with the Institute for Child Mediators and Conciliators, ICMC, the Institute for the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, that's at the Presidency, IPCR in Abuja. This is by far the most comprehensive, presentation on understanding conflict, especially in the aspects, in the coverage of the types of conflict. Hello? Can we hear me, please? Can we hear me?
Yes, we can.
Everybody should be
muted. Great.
Yeah.
And can you see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great.
Outline.
Oh, great. Great. So, we're going to be covering a lot this afternoon on understanding conflict. And I sincerely hope that by the time we end the session, you will have gained a deeper understanding and a broader perspective to conflict, because it will go a very long way in how you handle or you manage conflict. So what is the essential nature of conflict? Yes, we will start by our first assignment. What comes to mind when you think of conflict? What does conflict mean to you? What are those words that come to mind when you think of conflict? I want us to send our response to the chat while we keep on talking. Essentially, conflict is pervasive in our interactions, in our relationships. And this is because we are not all the same. We have our differences and diversities. And because we must relate, we are interdependent. That is why we cannot but have conflict. You see, the combination of all these differences of opinion, of religion, of preferences, and diversities, and our need to interrelate makes conflict inevitable in our relationships. However, conflict is neutral. It is neither negative or positive. What will determine whether conflict will be negative or positive will be our perception of conflict, our attitude to it, and our response. How we perceive it, our mental attitude to conflict, and our response is what will determine whether the conflict will be positive or have negative outcome. Our success as conflict managers therefore lie in our capacity to influence the perception, attitude, and response of parties to the conflict. I repeat, our success in managing people's conflict, by success I mean when we are able to bring constructive outcomes, positive outcomes from a conflict we are called to intervene in. That is success. We're able to move the conflict dynamics from negative towards positive. That is success. In other words, we bring about an improvement in the conflict. However, what will determine the success to a large extent is our capacity as conflict managers to influence the perception of people about conflict, to influence their attitude about conflict, and to influence their response. Now, when I mentioned conflict here, when I said influence the perception about conflict, I'm saying two things. I'm saying influence their perception about conflict in general, and influence their perception about their own particular conflict. And this is one of the things we want to do through this session, through this module, to influence our own perception. Because many, I'm going through the chart now. I'm certain that what's come to the mind of many of us will be negative words. Yes, I've seen misunderstanding. Yes, I've seen opposition, deprivation, tension, disagreement. I've only seen one resolution. Yes. From experience, when I train and I ask people to do this, especially in physical trainings, I get as much as, out of the responses, I get as much as 96 point something percent negative association with conflict. People will say tension, violence. I mean, negative words. They are correct because this is the way we have been socialized to think of conflict. We have associated conflict with violence. We have associated conflict with many negative things. So when we have conflict, our immediate mental attitude is, oh, something negative, something undesirable. Oh, they have started again. And it is not because we are Nigerians or Africans. That is how human beings are wired. Let me say, that is how we have socialized ourselves. It's only in recent times that from the field of conflict management studies, we are trying to say that there is nothing wrong about having conflict. What makes conflict to look wrong is, one, because we associate it with violence, and because we usually are not prepared, we are not trained to bring good things out of conflict. Let me give you a good illustration here. Waste, whether solid waste, liquid waste, anything waste is undesirable. That is why you wouldn't want somebody to just litter your surroundings. Nobody will appreciate people coming from outside to dump their waste in the front of our house or inside our house for that matter. Nobody likes that. Nobody will tolerate that. Why? Because it is waste. Waste brings with it the connotation of something useless. After the useful part of it has been consumed or utilized, now the unneeded part of it, waste. So We don't want a place to be, littered with waste. However, if you know that the waste can be converted to wealth, your attitude to the waste will change. I share a story, a hypothetical story that I put up, and the story is, supposing you have a guest toilet, a guest restroom attached to a sitting room, usually not inside the house, but it's part of the building, and people will just come in. Let's say the guest room, you can access it from outside, but it's still attached to the building. Now, you just notice that people will come in, use your guest room, they won't even greet you. They just open the doors, they see toilet or convenience or restroom. They open it and do whatever they want to do. Some will clean it, some will not, and they just go. Many of us will be mad. We will be living with anger. We will stop people, we harass them, and we'll be right because they are trespassing. However, let's say that we now know that for every individual that comes to use the place, they either pee or they poo, liquid or solid, and just know that you just discover that their pee, you can make ammonia from it. Maybe your soak away is now converted to something chamber that can separate their liquid, and then it can prepare ammonia. And ammonia is expensive, very expensive. You can prepare ammonia from it, and from their solid waste in the chamber, it can be converted to cooking gas. And everybody that comes just drop a kilogram worth of cooking gas. You get what I'm trying to paint? For everybody that uses that restroom now, as they drop their waste, your chamber converts their waste and gives you 1 kg of gas. 1 kg of gas, the last time I bought was 850 naira. Now, I want somebody to tell me what they will do if that is the case. The people's waste is now something that I can convert to gas, to wealth. I can even start gas filling stations, mini stations, because maybe an average of 50 people use my stuff every day, giving me 50 kg of gas. I can't use 50 kg of gas per day. Let me be selling gas. So, let me see. I want to call someone. Ahmad Nuhu, are you here? Nuhu. Okay, what will you do, Mr. Nuhu, Ahmad? We can't hear you. Hello? Okay, the next person on my... Okay, Mr. Nuhu?
Yes.
Okay. What are you likely to do if you're in that situation?
Yeah, I had some network glitch. I didn't get the scenario.
Oh, okay. Let me ask. It's a long scenario. Let me ask someone that got it. Madam Anita, are you here? Or anybody that got the scenario, what will you do?
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Onduka.
Yeah, Emmanuel. I will build more toilets. I will build more convenience because that is one.
Yes, we will build more toilets. Somebody even said he will begin to give people, he will put signposts outside and say, please, there's free toilet here, and for every time you use it, you get a bottle of Coke. You see, what has changed? Your attitude. Because you now know that their waste, you can convert it to wealth. That goes to say that when we have a deeper understanding of conflicts, and we're able to transfer this understanding to conflict parties, they may begin to see the beneficial aspect of conflict, and together we may work towards making their conflict a positive one or a constructive one. That is, one that has constructive outcome. That is why it is important, that's why I said here, it's important that we build our own capacity to influence the perception of conflict parties. Once we influence their perception, their attitude will follow, and their response will be almost automatic. And how can we build that capacity? By understanding conflict very well. So, there are benefits to conflicts. There are benefits to conflict. Some of them are, it makes people aware of problems. It promotes change. It improves solutions. It raises morale. It fosters personal development, and so on and so forth. Some people are not aware of a problem until it becomes conflictual. Maybe in a relationship between a boss and the staff. The employer may not, or the superior may not know that there's a problem until the employee brings it to the fore. And then this will lead to changes. Salary adjustments, reduction in the working hours of the day, more emoluments, more packages, and so on and so forth. And then there's peace again. So conflict has benefits. We have been socialized to associate negatives, mostly, more than 90% of the time, we associate negative to conflict. But as conflict managers, one of the ABCs of conflict management is to be aware of the benefits of conflict, is to be aware that conflict is essentially neutral. It is our perception to it, our attitude, and our response that determine whether it will be constructive or destructive. So, as a conflict manager, we not only have this capacity, we not only build this capacity, we also transfer, influence the parties to the conflict to tilt their views, their perception, their attitude, and their responses towards positive direction. We are very familiar with the negatives of conflict, so we wouldn't bother ourselves about that. So, how do we define conflict? We define it as a relationship between two or more individuals or groups, that is, two or more entities who have or think they have incompatible goals. Who have or think, and as I said in the first module, means that on one side we have conflicts that are based on real incompatible goals. On the other side, we have conflicts based on imagined incompatibilities. And I buttress that with this popular story of siblings who are fighting over an orange. 4 siblings fighting over a single orange. You know, naturally that will lead to brawling in the house, noise, name calling, abuses, claims and counter claims. Is my orange, I marked it, I was the one that kept inside the fridge, and so on and so forth. Now their mother intervenes, listens to all of them. As a conflict manager, their mother stands as a conflict manager. Sibling A, what do you need? I need the juice of the orange. Why do you need it? I need it because of my home economics assignment, which is about making orange juice. Okay. Sibling B, what do you need? I need the peel of the orange. Why? Because my home economics assignment is to bake meat pie, and I need the peel as aroma or whatever as directed by economics teacher. Okay, sibling 3, the seed. Why do you need it? I need the seed of the orange because in my integrated science, I'm asked to plant something, orange seed, and watch how many days it will take to grow. But I must take the seed to the class today. Okay. Sibling D, why do you need the orange? I need the orange because I ate too much last night and my tummy is like I'm going to have constipation. And I know that if I eat the roughage, then it will aid my digestion. Has one orange satisfy all of them? Yes. Because their mother was able to identify the need and interests of each sibling. So their own conflict was based on imagined incompatibility. Imagined. Many of the conflicts will be called to intervene in. They will be based on this kind of situation. Imagined incompatibility. So you will see that your first job as a conflict manager is to determine the nature of the incompatibility. Is it real incompatibility or imagined? The four siblings, while fighting, none of them had the patience to listen or to even articulate why they needed the orange. It's just, I need the orange. I need this orange. This orange is mine. You are this, you are that. When we get to communication later in the afternoon, we see the role communication plays in conflict. And now conflict manager can help. So from this definition of conflict, we see that some conflict will be based on real incompatibility, some will be based on imagined incompatibility. It is your job as conflict manager to determine which kind of incompatibility is in this case. So once you determine that, then you can move forward by now negotiating. We'll get to that later. So conflict is the response in attitude and behavior to perceived goals incompatibility. Once we perceive, perception can be real, it can be imagined. But whether real or imagined, the consequences are the same. So when an individual perceives this thing, maybe in himself, it can be something like how to tell or not to tell, to make choices between incompatible interests or goals. Even at that level of personal, intrapersonal conflict, if one takes time to analyze the goals very well, you may still find out that they are not as incompatible as they first appear. When this perceived goal incompatibility is between individuals or groups, they may decide to pursue their individual interest. Further, in this way, the conflict is further escalated. So, as a response to perceived incompatibility, parties can decide to sacrifice the goal. If the goal is not valuable to one party, can decide to let go. Parties can decide to try to hijack the goal, to fight over it, to get it, to satisfy their own interests and needs, and sacrifice that of their opponents. Also, the response can be to resolve the incompatibility. Let's work together to ensure that everybody's needs are satisfied to a greater extent, so that we have a win-win situation. So, as said, conflict is a situation of perceived incompatibility, which can be imagined or real. is the way we interpret the nature of incompatibility, the way we see the incompatibility, our attitude, which is dependent on how we see it. If we see the incompatibility in a zero-sum manner, oh, it's either I have it or they have it. But if you see the incompatibility as, oh, maybe we can negotiate, our attitude will be different. Also, conflict is how we communicate our perception. Two people they can perceive incompatible goals, and they can communicate in a gentle manner, they can communicate in a non-violent manner. Their outcome will be different from people that threaten, that try to coerce using violent communication. So conflict is also response in our behavior towards resolving the incompatibility. If we use or we adopt violent force, the conflict becomes violent. If we decide to use non-violent force, the conflict becomes non-violent. So all these things, perception of incompatibility, interpretation of incompatibility, attitude to incompatibility, communication to the incompatibility, and finally, behavior towards resolving this incompatibility. All these 5 variables combine to determine the nature of a particular conflict. So, a conflict manager will want to dissect the conflict you are entering, the conflict you are handling, by looking out for these 5 variables. Is the conflict based on real or imaginary compatibility? How are the parties interpreting? How are they communicating this? How are they behaving towards it? So, conflict is the outcome of our attitude and response to the perception of incompatibility, which shows in our communication and concrete action towards resolving the incompatibility. So you see that it is based, conflict is rooted essentially on attitude and response to perceived incompatibility. This will show in our communication and the steps we take. This will show in the communication of the parties and the steps they are taking. So I want us to take 5 minutes to look at these 3 images. Image 1 to the left, image 2 in the middle, and image 3 to the right. And I want us to type our response, our interpretation of each image in the chat box. We will say image 1, this is it. Image 2, this. Image 3, this. And we take 5 minutes to do that, please. So we continue by, we should have been done by 12:34. Perception is everything, reality will be nothing. So what do we see? This is a perception activity. I'm looking at the chat box now. Just chat image 1, image 2, image 3. Okay, they're coming in now. Okay, I think we have a few seconds now. I'll begin to read some of the responses. Mr. Emmanuel says, image 1, I see a serious-minded person. He didn't tell us whether male or female. Mr. I don't know whether it's a Mr. or Mrs. Ogaga Ogene. Ogaga Ogene. Image 1, liar. He sees it as a writing liar. Image 2, a man playing saxophone. Image 3, a side view of a lady. A side view of a lady. Hamad Nuhu, Mr. Nuhu says, image 1, a face of a man. Mr. Andoka says, image 2, I see a beautiful lady's face. Ominini Felix, Mr. Ominini says, image 1, a face of a man. Image 2, a man playing saxophone. Mr. Nuhu says, image 2 is a face of a lady. Mr. Felix, Mr. Ominini says, image 3 is a bird. Is a bird resting on a woman's shoulder. Is a bird resting on a woman's shoulder. Mr. Nuhu says, image 3 is a side view of a lady's face. Mr. Nduka says, image 3 is a lady sleeping. I don't know this person, Infinix Smart 6. Image 1 looks mean and unrepentant. Image 2 looks indecisive to go the way of peace or violence. Image 3 is not clear, but is looking like a gentle woman who is broken and peaceful. Madam Nora, we're sorry, network in a day is fluctuating. Sorry, we hope it's restored soon. Mrs. Precious, Madam Precious Maduka, image 1, an angry man. Image 2, a lady. Image 3, side view of a lady. Okay. Okay. So, you see, let the thing keep coming. Everyone can still tell us their interpretations of these images. The point here is all of us have seen the same thing, and each of us has interpreted it in our own way. Among us, some people's interpretation or perception of the image are similar. Some are contradictory. Some are even far away. This is what plays out in conflicts. People looking at the same issues, but interpreting them in different ways. As a conflict manager, you must be aware of this. It does not make any one of them superior or intelligent and the other stupid. It's just that we are looking at it from different perspectives. I was watching a documentary on Netflix yesterday. I started some days back. Spy Ops. I think it's a new movie there. Spy is showing spy operations of different nations, and in a particular case where a KGB officer from Russia, KGB is the Russia Secret Service of Russia, was converted to the British side and was giving British intelligence on Russia. At a point, Russia almost caught him due to one American spy, CIA, that has also been converted to Russia. I mean, you know that kind of stuff. He was the one that was going to reveal the identity of this guy. At the end of the day, Britain was able to take the guy out of Russia before the Russian government could finally nab him. Now, one of the commentators said something remarkable. He said to Russia, that man was a betrayer. He was unpatriotic. But to to Britain, is a hero. And according to the documentary, the intelligence that the man gave Britain, which he also shared with America, really improved the outcome of the Cold War. But there is still death sentence on that man in Russia till date. The man is about 80-something years now. Maybe he did those things in his mid-40s, thereabout. 40 years after, Russia is still looking for him to kill him. So Russia and Britain are looking at the same thing, but they are interpreting it differently. And the actions they want to take towards these incompatible views, each has its own version. The same way in conflict managers must be aware, must be sensitive to this. Different parties, various parties, looking at the same thing, but interpreting it differently. Perception, they say, is everything. Reality will be nothing. That is why working on people's perception about the general nature of conflicts and about the nature of their own specific conflicts is very important for conflict managers. So I've spoken about this, that our perception, our understanding of conflict, and the perception of conflict has implications for conflict resolution. And the implication is, I'm repeating again, parties' perception are important. Their interpretation of the incompatibility, very important. Their response towards the incompatibility is important. Their response includes what they say about it, how they communicate about it, and also their concrete actions towards resolving this conflict. These are the areas we must identify and work on as conflict managers. Okay, still talking about the importance of perception and attitudes towards conflict in general and towards a particular case in conflict. It is important that conflict managers have some metaphors, some useful metaphors to describe conflict. And that was why we gave the assignments on understanding the language of conflict through metaphors. You see, we have these metaphors, these 8 metaphors in our course activity, And each of these metaphors is assigned to a group. But I've said that before the group comes together to discuss the metaphor, each participant should reflect on the metaphor that is assigned to them. You see, these metaphors project either negative side of conflict or positive side. Negative side or positive side. A conflict manager wants to be armed with as many positive metaphors as is possible. As many positive metaphors as possible. For instance, one of the most popular metaphors that I use, and that many conflict managers use, is that conflict is like what conflict is to in a relationship is like a pain in the body. And I will now tell people that in my place, among the Yorubas have this adage that Ori bibe koni ogun ori fifo, meaning decapitulation is not the antidote to headache. If your head is aching, you can't cut off the head as the solution. By that, I'm saying to the parties this is just a misnomer in your relationship. You don't have to end the relationship because of these issues. But that depends on the kind of relationship and the issue anyway. But in most relationships, you find out that people who have been friends for 5-10 years, because of something now, they say, no, we are not going to be friends again. I will stop being friends. Say, but you have invested so much into this relationship, depending on the issue, like I said. So this is what we use metaphor for. If I'm involved in a communal conflict, I will look for metaphors, either in sayings, proverbs, folklore, adage, or whatever, of those community people that promote peaceful coexistence, that promote peace. And in addressing them, I want to use those metaphors. What we are trying to do by that is we are trying to change their attitude, their perception about the conflict. Because just like the UNESCO, what do we call this document? Is it treaty or UNESCO? Something like treaty. It's not treaty anyway. That is their establishing document. Just that document says, it says, just as war begins in the heart, in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that defenses for peace must be constructed. So when we use metaphors, positive metaphors about conflict, what we are doing is we are trying to weaken the defenses for conflict in the minds of people. We are trying to strengthen the defenses for peace in their minds so that they be more receptive to productive suggestions, be more receptive to conflict management. So metaphor are one of the tools we use to change parties' mindsets and their perception about conflict. So I want to encourage us to go over those metaphors that have been assigned. You can do more than that of your group, and then you answer these 5 questions. These 5 questions are also in the activity, course activities, and then when you now come together in your group, you will harmonize these things. You see, at the end of the day, each participant will have a document that is answer to all those questions. They will become to you like a resource material. That is what we are aiming at. Yes, you will submit it to us because it will include what we used to say you actually participated and you gained, and it will be on the basis we issue certificates to those who are interested in getting certificates. But at least it will be a material for you to hold. So does anybody have any question in this area before we proceed on the metaphors and the activities surrounding them? Okay, let's proceed then. Why do we have conflict? Why do we have conflict? There are some things that contribute to people's grievances. We have said, yes, generally it's incompatibility which arise from our differences and the feelings and communication about this incompatibility and how we pursue this incompatibility. Yes, these are reasons we have conflict, but some people have also identified other things: pressure, goals, personal differences, power plays, values, misunderstandings, and so on and so forth. Now, there are many explanations or theories that have been put forward to explain why we have conflict. We'll be touching 4 of them here: human needs theory, relational theory, political theory, and transformative theory. What does each of these explanations say about why we have conflict? Human needs theory says conflict arises because of unfulfilled human needs. Economics makes us to understand that our needs are unsatiable, whereas we have limited resources. And because of this, that is why we have conflict. Human needs. Human needs theory believes that there are fundamental human needs, which includes physical needs, psychological needs, economic, social, and spiritual needs. That if these needs are not met, they will lead to conflict. Also, people love recognition, either as individual or as a group. They love their identity, security, autonomy, and bonding. When these things are denied, because they are human needs, they will lead to conflict. Relational theory puts the reasons for conflicts in our interactions. We are different, we are diverse, but we have the need to interact. And this interaction breeds conflict. The farmer needs the meat of the other needs the farm produce of the farmer. We must interact. But that interaction, those relationships, are the bedrock of conflict. Therefore, conflict is inevitable. So when we say conflict is inevitable, it's coming from the perspective of relational theory. And that this our relationship at the individual level and group level will be marred by poor communication, miscommunication, distrust, wrong perceptions, and so on and so forth. Also, it can be marred by scarce resources. Political theory puts the reasons we have conflict within the sphere of political power. The struggle for political power, use, misuse, or abuse of political power are the reasons for conflict. So, people contest and compete for political power to gain access to resources. Also, when political power is weak in a failed or weak state, when a government does not enjoy legitimacy, or when there is poor governance, all related to political power, this leads to conflict. The transformative theory places the reasons for having conflict within the changes that we experience, the change that we experience in our society. Sometimes you have structural injustices, inequalities, and so on and so forth that must be corrected. The process of transforming this system, of improving this system, leads to conflict because the status quo is paying some people, and some people are clamoring for change, incompatibility of goals. And that it is within this desire for change, desire to transform our society, ourselves, it is within this that we have conflict, that is, within the forces of change. So, these are the 4 explanations that we will be looking at in this module. And as a conflict manager, the import of this is that we want to see this conflict I'm engaging in, which of these explanation addresses. Many times you will have multiple explanations in a particular theory, in a particular conflict space. That is, there may be human needs dimension, the relational dimension, sometimes including the political dimension or the transformation dimension. What we are saying is that the onus rests on you as a conflict manager to be able to identify all the possible reasons, all the possible explanations for this particular conflict that you are engaging. Because the greater your depth of understanding, the more robust your understanding of this particular conflict is, the better or the more robust will be your engagement. And the more robust your engagement, the more sustainable will be the solution you propose for the conflict situation. Now we move to looking at types of conflict. I mentioned in the morning session that this is one of the, in fact, this is actually the most comprehensive presentation I've made on types of conflict. The parameters that we use to categorize conflict are many here. One, conflict outcome. The force, the nature of the force adopted in the conflict, the stage of the conflict, the level in which the conflict is happening or space within which it is happening, the causes of the conflict, and the major driver of the conflict. At least we have these 6 parameters. So we're going to be looking at these parameters one after the other, and then be looking at the types of conflict we have under each parameter. Okay, when we categorize conflict based on outcome, we can have functional or constructive conflict, and we can also have dysfunctional or destructive conflict. Dysfunctional. A conflict is functional when, or constructive, when the outcome brings more of benefits or beneficial effects of conflict than the negative impact of conflict. In other words, it leads to better relationship. It yields an attempt to satisfy the parties' interest. The parties are better after the conflict than they were before the conflict. So, in other words, the conflict has led to some functional, some constructive things. So they are called functional conflicts. And as we know, a conflict will be made functional or otherwise depending on our perception, attitude, or the perception, attitude, and behavior of the people in it, including you, the conflict manager. So we also have dysfunctional or destructive conflict. This is the opposite of the functional conflict. It's a situation where parties can't work together to address their interests. Hence, they adopt tactics to satisfy their own interests and needs and sacrifice the interests and needs of the other party. It leads to a win-lose situation. So these are the types of conflict based on outcome. Now, based on the type of force adopted, we have violent conflict, in which case either of the party or both parties, they adopt violent force. Violent protest, armed conflict, militancy, terrorism, war. These are violent conflicts. Non-violent conflicts, in this case, the parties or one party adopts that is predominantly adopts non-violent force. For example, strikes, peaceful protests, boycotts, sit-ins, and so on and so forth. So when we categorize conflict based on the type of force adopted, we have violent conflict, or non-violent conflict. So when you have people say, well, that conflict is violent, oh, that conflict is a non-violent conflict, what they are using is they are looking at the type of force that was predominantly adopted by parties or a party in the conflict. So when we categorize conflicts based on the stage of at which the conflict is, we have what we call latent conflict and open conflict. Latent conflict is conflict that the parties are not yet aware of the underlying incompatibility. So we don't really know there's any incompatibility going on. For instance, a good case is where two people are interested in a political position, but the two of them, maybe two friends, election period, but the two of them are not yet aware that each of them is nursing the ambition. Or when two guys are interested in a lady, two friends, they are still nursing the ambition, they are not yet aware. The incompatibility is there, but it's still below the surface. But it becomes open when the parties are now aware, when they're now conscious of their incompatibilities. Okay, we can categorize conflict. This is one of the most popular categorization. We can categorize conflict based on the space or the level at which the conflict is happening. So we have intrapersonal conflict, that is conflict within an individual over incompatible goals. What do I do? Do I tell? Do I not tell? Conflict, battle of the mind. What do I do? Is an intrapersonal conflict. We have interpersonal conflict, which is conflict between two or more people over personal interests, values, and needs. Conflict between two or more people over personal interests, values, and needs. Look at it. You need to underline the word personal interest there. That phrase, personal interest. Because two or more individuals can fight over interests, values, and needs that are not personal. That becomes group, intergroup, or intra-group conflict. So the kind of interest, whether personal or not, is what differentiates interpersonal conflict from all right. Okay, we have intra-group conflict, which is a conflict that occurs within a group. But this conflict is not on personal interests. It's based on group interests, group values, group needs. And it leads to group members mobilizing along different factions. Example is internal party crisis. However, interpersonal conflicts among members of a group can become an intra-group conflict. For instance, when two individuals have, let's say this does happen as well. Maybe let me use the example of ladies now. Two ladies liking a man in the group, and their friends within the group begin to mobilize with them. And then when an issue comes, a group issue comes, once a group A takes this option, group B fires back. So they're now, in that case, personal interest is now being woven around group interest. So that's how personal conflict, interpersonal conflict can become intra-group conflict. We also have intergroup conflict, which of course means conflict between two groups. You see, the group can be any kind of group: community, states, nations, football groups, and so on and so forth. Any kind of group. So when two groups or subgroups And conflict, what we have is intergroup conflict. And then also we have interstate or international conflict. That is conflict between two nations. Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Russia-Ukraine conflict. These are examples of interstate or international conflict. Okay, now we can also categorize conflict based on the causes of conflict. There are 5 main causes of conflicts, which are information, values, interests, relationships, and structures. So we have information conflict, values conflict, interest conflict, relationships conflict, and structural conflict. Now, information conflict is conflict that arises due to difference in or insufficient information or disagreement over what information is useful. So either the parties don't have enough information or they disagree over what information is relevant. So, to resolve such conflicts, when we give sufficient time to listen, when parties are given sufficient time to listen to the other party and be listened to, the gaps in the information will be filled up and the disparities will be cleared. But we must create an environment where they can be listened to and listen, an environment that is respectful, an environment where there will not be name calling and abuse and threats for the two parties to supply necessary information and clear disparities. Conflict over values conflict, is conflict based on perceived, that is imagined, or real incompatible belief systems. This exists in our culture, in our religion. A group believes this, another group believes that. Even within religions, within sects, in sects, religious sects, the Shiites and the Sunnis, the Catholics and the Protestants, within the same religion, different value, different belief system leads to values conflicts. And that happens when a particular group wants to impose its own values or claims on other people's, on other people. Or when they claim exclusive rights to a set of values. So values are non-negotiable, yes, but they can be discussed, and people with different values can learn to live peacefully and coherently together. Yes, a good place where I've seen this is in the Southwest, where Muslims and Christians cohabit so peacefully. So peacefully. Hardly is there a family, or let me say majority of families in the Southwest, they have people from both religions, either in the present generation or a generation earlier. Uncle is a Muslim, father is a Muslim, mother is a Christian, and then the children are Muslims or Christians, and so on. Okay, we have interest conflicts. These are conflicts caused by competition over real or imagined incompatible interests and needs. Many of the conflicts will be called to manage, they will be interest driven, money issues, resources, time, and so on and so forth. These are things that can be negotiated, unlike values. You can't ask somebody to drop his values. You can't reason people out of values most of the time because they define their identity. So, but we have interest conflict which are far easier to resolve, and interest-based conflicts are concrete. They have clearly defined issues and obvious potential for mutual benefits. Many times parties believe that in order to satisfy their own needs, those of their opponents must be sacrificed. that is erroneous. But this is the baggage that parties bring to you as conflict managers. As if once this person has it, I cannot have it. But our effort will be to let them see. We can build a larger cake so that it will go round. And that is done mainly through negotiation and mediation. Relationship conflicts are conflicts that are based on misperceptions, strong negative emotions, or poor communication. A party may distrust the other party and believe that the actions of the other party are motivated by malice or an intention to injure them. These are all parts of relationship conflict, and we can address this kind of conflict by allowing each person, each party, time, uninterrupted time to talk through the issues and respond to the other person's concerns. Structural conflicts, I've said a lot about structural violence. So structural conflicts are products of structural violence. It is conflicts that ensue due to deprivation, injustices, oppression, and so on and so forth. There are laws, there are policies, there are frameworks that precipitate conflict behavior. There are some things that precipitate that, including the contradictions and incompatibilities that are built in the fabrics of relationships. I gave examples of that earlier. Are built into the fabrics of relationships. Okay, I read a post by one of my nieces recently. This young lady, a university lady, is currently engaged to the head of the fellowship. That is, they call him Papa. He's engaged to her, and the lady was pouring out her heart that people should help her, that in this, she's afraid of marrying this guy really. What happens is that the guy, anytime the guy feels the lady has offended her, he just throw her into days of fasting. Go and fast for 3 days and be asking for forgiveness. He's seeking the face of God and the face of me. And the guy, I was already giving our rules. When we get married, these are the kind of people that cannot come to our house, or family members, this one, that one, that one. You see that kind of thing being built into relationship. There are many relationships that suffer from such things, cruel rules, and sometimes we have it in organizations and societies. Okay, so that's that about conflict based on, types of conflict based on the causes, using the parameters of causes. But I must say that many times a conflict can have multiple, that is how it is usually. Multiple, multiple schemes. In other words, it can be interpersonal and still be seen as this and still be seen as that. You see, the reason for showing us all these different types is that we may be able to identify the different strands or dimensions of types or of things, let me say types of conflict in a particular conflict. Because a conflict at the same time may be intergroup, communal, ethnic, or ethno-religious, identity-based. So you've got to bring out all the ingredients, all the elements of these types. You must be conscious of them in proposing your solutions as conflict managers. Okay, so we look at now conflict based on drivers. on the drivers of conflict. Conflict drivers are the major issues that define the overarching character of a particular conflict. That is, they are major causes of the conflict and they play significant roles in its continuity. Things like religion, ethnicity, resources, identity. These are common drivers of conflict. So, religious conflict is an example of that. These are conflicts that are driven by religious differences or differences in beliefs, in religious beliefs. Like I said, it may be between religions or within a religion. Sunni Shiites, Catholic Protestants, Christian Muslims, all examples of religious conflict. And religious conflict, studies have shown, I think it has the highest, either the highest or the second highest casualties in the history of man. Men have killed and have been killed in the name of God or in the name of a belief system. And this is because religious conflict has always very, very difficult, because religion not only promises or tells people about how to live their lives now, it also promises their lives after death. For many religions that has the notion of life after death, like Christianity, Islam. So that's why people are usually crazy, as it were, about religious conflict, defending the identity, defending the belief, and so on and so forth. Ethnic conflicts are conflicts that are driven mainly by ethnic differences, especially when there is mutual distrust or mistrust between the ethnic groups in their competition for power, resources, and territories. In divided society like Nigeria, where the rights of ethnic groups to power, resources, and are not guaranteed, ethnic conflict seems to be, recurrent. However, studies have shown that people are not, they don't go into conflict just because they are different ethnically. It's when these ethnic differences coincide with political benefits, social benefits, economic benefits, that is when people get mad. For instance, when a particular ethnic group has access to political power, the denied ethnic group want to compete for it. But the truth is, as diverse as Nigeria, as multi-ethnic as we are, many times you don't get to see the differences until the time of politics. You don't get to see the differences until the time of politics. Why? Because we are reminded that the ethnic group that has access to the power will have access to resources, and then we begin to scramble and all sorts. People don't care. I've always told people don't care who is the president of Nigeria if they are sure that their rights, their privileges, their whatever will be guaranteed. If you like, go and bring somebody from Lesotho or from Ghana. People ultimately don't care. But we begin to care because these rights are not guaranteed, or they are better guaranteed when our ethnic man is there. Ethno-religious conflict. Okay, I need to say this about ethnic conflict. It's also very, very, complex, because ethnicity is like, there's something we call ethno-nationalism. You see, is our loyalty to our ethnic group, and something occurs because we see our ethnic men and women as our extended family. They are like our kinsmen. So when religion and ethnicity now combine, We call it ethno-religious conflict. It's one of the most difficult conflicts. When you have Hausa Muslim, and then you have minority, I'm talking about middle belts, the center, what they call central now. You now have the indigenous, who are mainly Christians, right, in a community, and you have ethno-religious conflict. Many times such conflicts are difficult to resolve. Not only because of their complexity, but because many times when conflict managers, mediators, negotiators, and blah, 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 when they go there, they are not careful enough to be able to look at the tributaries, the contributing factors to the conflict. They just look at it as ethnic conflict or religious conflict. They don't get a robust understanding of such conflicts. Okay, identity-based conflicts are conflicts that are based in people's differences in people's psychology, culture, values, shared history, and beliefs. Some people call themselves indigenes, and then you are settlers. Oh, we are Christians, you are Muslims. Social identity, and so on and so forth. Farmers, herders, we are traditionally farmers. You see, that's our identity. That occupation is our identity. Now, your herd are just destroying our friend. We are trying to destroy our identity. These could be a major driver in a conflict. Although many times identity conflicts are expressed as material disputes. Okay, resource-based conflicts. Resources could be natural or not. There are so many conflicts that are driven by contention over access to resources, control of resources, or distribution of resources. In Nigeria, we have had so many resource control conflicts. It's a resource control. So it's mainly disagreement or incompatibility over access to resources, control over these resources, and use of these resources. Communal conflicts are conflicts organized along shared community identity, over community issues and involving community people, and it occurs within or in close proximity to community territory. Communal conflict may be within a community, or between one community and another, or between a community and organization like Ogoni and Shell, or between a community and government, OG, and federal government, and so on and so forth. As long as it is over community issues, over community identity, it involves community people, and is happening within the territory of the community or in close proximity to it, that is what we call communal conflict. Unlike religious, ethnic, and identity conflict, it tends to be intractable. It tends to be difficult to manage. There are other types of conflicts that we use other parameters for. Sometimes we use geopolitical space, and we can have intrastate or civil war, international or transnational conflicts. We can also use the parameter of how difficult it is to manage the conflict. And then we have tractable or intractable or protracted conflicts. So in conclusion, it is important to identify or diagnose a conflict very well for us to manage it. In practice, a conflict will be a mixture of more than one type of conflict. As a conflict manager, we must be able to identify all types of conflict present, or let me say all strands of conflict present in a particular conflict situation. One of the main reasons we have the phenomenon of protracted conflict or intractable conflict is because conflict managers misdiagnose a particular conflict. They don't identify all the strands of conflict. Like medical doctors, when you go for tests, they will say there's strand so fever, there's strand so. They will identify all the strands of a parasite that is present in that disease. And then it's on the basis of that that they now offer therapy. They recommend, go and use this drug. If a medical doctor fails to identify all the strands of either parasite or virus or whatever, and it prefers or proposes therapy, that therapy may not be adequate. And in fact, it may lead to a situation whereby some of the strands will now become resistant. And that is what has been happening in many conflicts. Because of misdiagnosis, then some strands of the conflict now become resistant, and then the resistance now spreads, and then the conflict becomes intractable. So it is very important for you, a conflict manager, to be able to identify all the strands, all the types of conflicts, all the nuances, the innuendos of conflict that are present in a particular conflict, for you to be able to propose something that will address all these. Therefore, the first step in effective conflict management is correctly identifying a conflict for what it is. I will want to wrap up. We have 5 minutes left. I want to wrap up now. I don't know whether there are questions on what I've been saying so far. Do we have questions? We have covered 3 sections. Understanding conflicts, that is the title. We've seen the definition of conflict, types of conflict, just completed types of conflict, the role of perception in conflict, and so on and so forth. So, do we have comments or questions before we go on break? Anyone? Any question? Okay, if there are none, in the next 4 minutes, let's see what we can do in the stages of conflict. Conflict has stages. Conflict don't just blow up. There are 8 stages identified here. There is the stage of no conflict, and that no conflict is a little bit misleading. We are talking of a stage where all conflicts are managed through a mechanism for constructive conflict management. The next stage is latent conflict. Yes, I've spoken about that, other types of conflict. The 3rd stage is emergence. 4th, escalation. 5th, stalemate or halting stalemate. Then we move to de-escalation. Stage 7, settlement or resolution. And then post-conflict, peace building, and reconciliation. And here we have a graph or a picture to depict how conflict changes in intensity over time. At the peak of the conflict, you have stalemate. It may be ordinary stalemate or halting stalemate. So you see, intensity, that is intensity of hostility, of dysfunctional dynamics over time. Intensity is plotted on the y-axis, time on the x-axis. The first stage of conflict I talked about under types of conflict, and is called latent conflict. Here we have potential for conflict because of people's different needs, values, or interests. And I gave the example of two individuals who are interested in the same position but are not yet aware of their interests. The next stage is emergence, where the two parties or two or more parties are now aware, they are now conscious that all of them or the two of them are moving towards the same goal. Therefore, they have incompatible goals. There, we have become conscious. Emergence stage can be followed quickly by settlement or resolution. They can call themselves together and say, okay, you go first, after you, I will go, or after you, I will go, and they will say, okay, alternatively, let everybody go to the field, may the best candidate win. So it's either we go to settlement or resolution, or the conflict escalates. So if the conflict is not settled or resolved, then we move to escalation. And this is a very, very critical stage. Escalation is the cycle of provocation and counter-provocation that can quickly transform constructive conflict into destructive ones, tractable conflict into intractable ones. Because at this stage, the parties are mobilized to neutralize each other. So they begin to do provocative things. They begin to take steps to ensure that they satisfy their own interests at the expense of the other party. Borges says escalation is the most destructive force on the planet. And we will continue in that when we come back from our break. We will see how destructive escalation can be, and how we can tame it, how we can even constructively escalate a matter for a positive outcome. So I want to thank you once again for your time. I think it's 1:30, or it's even 1:31. This is a break period. Dr. Ajepe? Okay. I'm not sure whether...
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Prof. Yeah, so we have 1 hour break. We'll come back at 2:30. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll expect everybody back 2:30 dot. We'll start the second part of understanding conflict. Thank you. Enjoy your break.
Thank you, everyone.
How do we get our meal, please?
Hey, that is very important.
We'll post it across.
Dr. Ajepe,
yes, madam.
You escaped the breakfast. So now we are waiting for the lunch. Please.
Wait for the courier. I will send it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye.